I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
March about to turn into April, the world moving so fast, but we slow the roll on Friday to take a look back at the big stories that matter here in our city. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, I'm joined by writer and CityCast Las Vegas alum Scott Dickensheets and April Corbin-Gurness, deputy editor of the Nevada Current, and we're talking about Uber and the trial lawyers avoiding a collision in the legislature with a big compromise, the $200 million residential homeless service center stirring up neighbors, and a little birthday celebration for us. That's right, CityCast Las Vegas is turning 3 years old. It's Friday, March 28th. I'm David Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Scott and April, welcome to our Friday News Roundup.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, David. Thanks for having me. I love what you guys have done with the place since I left.
Yeah, well, we try to clean it up for you. It's not always this nice. Well, you might remember back in the day, Scott, we used to do on Friday News Roundup something called the Hot Headline. We actually have a hot headline right now, but we also do something called the hot ledge line because the legislature's in session. So the hot headline, just really briefly, it looks like the police have a suspect in custody for the Tesla, I don't know what you want to call it, bombing, explosion, shooting at the Tesla service center that happened not terribly long ago. All we know is it is a male. He's 36 years old. And according to Channel 8, they looked up someone with his name who is registered as a nonpartisan. So the mystery will continue, and we'll keep our eyes on that. But let's get into the hot ledge line. Hot ledge line. That's something that happened in the legislature this week worth noting. So despite his office being the subject of an ethics complaint for using public funds to support a makeshift task force, Lieutenant Governor Stavros Anthony seems singularly obsessed with one issue. And this week, the ledge heard testimony from kids apparently coordinated by his task force. Do you want to guess what this pressing issue in Nevada is from Governor Stavros Anthony's eyes?
It is the most important issue facing the whole world right now, which is trans girls playing in sports.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It's AB 240. It's a GOP-backed bill to prohibit transgender athletes from competing in Nevada schools. When asked by the Nevada Independent how many transgender athletes there even are in Nevada, Anthony said he had no idea. I guess his task force is real crackerjack there. But, quote, from Stavros, one is too many. The Dems have announced that this bill would not be getting full hearings, so it just seems like a lot of showboating in the culture wars. Any final thoughts on that, guys?
Well, the only way he could be more incensed is if they use the HOV lane to get to their sporting event.
Yeah, those are his two biggies. That's what's propelled him into the public eye. All right, let's get to some real news. It looks like Uber, the rideshare company, has reached an agreement in the legislature with the trial lawyers who they were battling. So, April, tell us what it was all about and where it's gone.
Yeah, so if you recall, for about a year or so now, Uber and the trial lawyer industry have been beefing. The rideshare giant across the country has found itself dealing with literally hundreds of lawsuits from customers, a lot of them about sexual harassment incidences with drivers. Then they've been waging war basically against who they call greedy billboard lawyers who take all the money and drive up costs for everyone. And the lawyers are hitting them back with obviously you're just trying to do this because everybody is suing you. So they've been going back and forth. And last year, Uber backed a proposed ballot measure to cap lawyer fees. But the Nevada Supreme Court threw that out for being misleading. So fast forward to today, the parties have reached a deal, and they are now backing a bill. It's Assembly Bill 523, and it's being fast-tracked through the legislature. And the bill essentially decreases the minimum insurance coverage needed by Uber drivers. It brings it from 1.5 million down to 1 million. And on the other end, rideshare companies will not be held liable for the harms imposed by their drivers.
Oh.
So everyone, it appears, is ready to sort of put this issue to rest.
Before that, as I understand it, the Uber lobby was really trying to put a cap on how much attorneys could even recover. And so that would have really hit trial lawyers in their pockets, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I don't know. That seems like it'd probably be a very popular campaign, Scott. Like, trial lawyers shouldn't be able to get as much money. Do you think that it was going to resonate and the trial lawyers needed to do something?
Probably. I mean, in a battle of tech bros versus trial lawyers, who do you root for, So,
Oh, gosh. I mean, as a lawyer, I'm offended, but I also totally get that.
But I do think that, people are sort of predisposed to think the worst of attorneys anyway. So I think Uber could have gotten some traction with the whole idea of sort of capping attorneys' fees, reining in these crazy billboard lawyers. I do think there might have been a little bit of, like I say, traction there.
Yeah, I would say that the lawyers' pushback on that is like, well, we have to be incentivized to take on these cases.
Mm-hmm.
And there are cases, as April pointed out. I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of legitimate cases against drivers in all manner of misconduct, I'd imagine. It's not just sexual. But I'm wondering, is limiting the liability of the deep pocket, the rideshare company, and the amount of coverage, is that a good idea? Is that a compromise that works best for the community?
I'll let April field that one.
I think that's a great question for the lawyer in this group. No.
No.
No. I think obviously both of those things exist for good reason if you get into the arguments for that. And it's all about finding the right balance, right? I think for me, the real question is like, what environment have we created where this type of litigation has become so common, right? And nothing in the bill that both of these groups are backing now seems to address that underlying issue. And that might be something that, I don't know, lawmakers might want to consider. Like, why are we in this position in the first place? Like, why are there hundreds or thousands of lawsuits against rideshare drivers? And maybe get to the root and then let the lawyers and Uber battle it out in the courtroom.
Because as I understand it, this bill doesn't address any of those kind of lawsuits, right?
Exactly.
It has no impact on those existing lawsuits. It's just a way to sort of minimize things going forward.
When rideshare was first introduced, the taxi lobby here was very much against it because they said they're not going to have to play by the same rules that we do, and it was really unfair. There were a lot of other concerns, but they were all sort of tossed aside. How has the introduction of rideshares changed Las Vegas, for better or worse?
Well, from my personal perspective, if I needed a cab to get from here to the airport, I'd be waiting a long time because the cab company's not going to just drive out to my far-flung suburb to take one share when they could be cycling through the airport and the hotels. Mm-hmm. Or if I do, I'd be waiting a long time, whereas an Uber, rideshare person will be a lot more responsive. And as anybody who's driven on these roads knows, taxi drivers are like wicked scary when they're in a hurry. And so I'm all in favor of any program that sort of gets people from one place to the other in a safer manner. I've never been in a scary taxi or scary ride with an Uber driver.
I mean, that was kind of the concern, is that they were going to be doing things better and more efficiently, but also that they weren't an actual transport company. And the questions about screening whose car you're getting into. And I mean, I have my partner put on a Trace app, so I know where she's going when she gets into a Lyft. I mean, how's your opinion of ride shares as a functional operation here in Las Vegas, April?
I mean, I think it's great to be able to see where the driver is coming. Like Scott said, it's great to have that and know that. I wish that the taxi companies had that technology and just used that, right? I think there's, this is kind of in a different vein, but I think there's a lot of places, and I'm looking at you, Harry Reid International Airport, where like the designated pickup spot for rideshare is like tucked away in a back corner and it's really ugly and the vibes are off, And I think that's bad for the experience and bad for, like, I prefer the aesthetic of the taxi line. And I don't know, I think which is a weird thing to
It
maybe
just seems more
focus on,
civilized.
It seems
Less,
more civilized.
as I've called it before, Mad Max.
And honestly, it's also just like, I don't know if I've taken the taxi, like I've taken a taxi from the airport going home before. And like people will chat with you in that line and they're, like it's kind of fun. You get to talk to like the tourists and see where they're going or the locals who happen to not have anyone who loves them enough to pick them up from the airport or whatever. But like if you go to the like rideshare pickup line, is just 17 people staring at their phones and it's kind of sad. I don't know. I think there's
Well, I guess my basic point is that this is something that's between two very well-financed, well-heeled groups. And the public in the middle, we're still kind of trying to figure out how rideshare impacts our lives, how the gig economy impacts our lives, how all of these new technologies do. And I would hope that this very debate, which now seems to be somewhat settled, would spawn more conversations about, let's go take another look at rideshare and see what we could do to improve the process for all of Las Vegas, I mean, you think that'll ever happen, or are we just moving on?
I think we're just moving on. But I will say, I think one point worth noting is that Uber driving has helped a lot of people pay their bills. And so, I would hate to throw that baby out with the bathwater, because I know people who have improved their lives by being able to do some rideshare work, help pay their bills. So I don't want that part of it at that root level to get lost in this sort of high-end discussion about well-moneyed interests battling each other.
The first ever TEDx Las Vegas event is happening on April 5th at the Keep Memory Alive Event Center in downtown Las Vegas. TEDx Las Vegas is more than a local event, it's a global platform. After the talks, they're shared with 42 million subscribers worldwide on the official TEDx YouTube channel. Speakers this time will include an Olympic gold medalist, a former member of the Raiders, a filmmaker, a restaurateur, a climate scientist, educators, performers, and more. Personally, I'm excited to see poets and community activists Rodney Lee and Elizabeth Allen Berry, as well as Neon Museum Executive Director Aaron Berger. Tickets start at $150 for general admission and $250 for VIP, which includes priority seating, a commemorative gift, and entry to a dine-around dinner post-event. Limited tickets remain, so grab yours at www.tedxlasvegas.org/tickets.
Hear that? It's SpringFest savings calling your name, only at Lowe's. Right now, get a free Select Ego 56-volt battery when you buy a Select Ego trimmer, blower, or mower. Plus, get your choice of any 2 bags of Miracle-Gro organic soil mix for only $16. Shop these can't-miss deals in-store or online today. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 4/2. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Excludes Hawaii.
All right, well, speaking of moving on, we've got another topic, so let's go hit that one. The Campus of Hope is something we've talked about on the podcast before. This is a big residential service center for people experiencing homelessness. It's supposed to be over on Charleston and Jones. $100 million from the resort industry, $100 million of public funds. But there was recently a meeting, Scott, where some neighbors of that area gave some pushback. Tell me about that.
Yeah, Brian Knudsen, the city councilman, convened some neighbors this week to talk about their concerns. They had heard about this thing happening, but hadn't been consulted. There hadn't been other neighborhood meetings previously leading up to it. And they were concerned about what you would expect in this sort of world of NIMBY ping pong we have here. They're concerned about, are there going to be homeless people wandering the streets and menacing my children? Are my property values going to go down? The standard sort of panoply of concerns that you would expect people to have with something like this moving in based on what they think they know. But it sounds like, from everything I've read about it, that it's not going to be a drop-in facility. Like, homeless people won't be flocking there to seek services. They will have to be sort of onboarded at navigation centers, they're called, elsewhere in the city. And they'll have to be vetted and approved. And so basically it's transitional housing. It's not emergency housing for people, that who are at immediate risk. It's not permanent housing. It's in between where they can get some social services, some job training, some stability, and then move on, presumably to more permanent housing. So it probably won't be the case that there'll be a lot of random homeless people sort of dropping in, which I hope will assuage some of the neighbors' concerns so that something like this, which is, desperately needed in this town, in this valley, can move forward.
I will agree with you, Scott, that good solutions are needed to the growing challenges of people who are homeless in our community. I think the jury still might be out on whether this specific project is the best use of money, but I don't know because it is still kind of tentative, and yet now we're already hearing pushback from these neighbors.
Well,
do you think they were satisfied with the answers that they were given?
It's not clear to me whether they were particularly mollified by the answers they got, and it's hard to know in the abstract what's really going to happen. There's plenty of other homeless programs that have not been super successful, so they have reason, they have reason to be cautious, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, Charleston and Jones, that's not a historically underserved neighborhood, I guess. It's also not a necessarily wealthy enclave. The vibe is pretty much solid middle class, maybe tilting down a little. But do the neighbors have legitimate concerns about, some of the things that Scott mentioned, April, the value of their homes or, too much gathering outside or that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like Scott said, the devil's in the details, right? Like, we're not sure. Like Scott said, this is not envisioned as Las Vegas Skid Row. It's not envisioned as the homeless immediate shelter that you see sort of downtown. I will say, people staying somewhere for 3 months to a year is something that I think a lot of people will push back on, just in the sort of like NIMBYism sort of way, right? And beyond the build, because the construction is being split like by the public, the state, and the resort industry, ongoing costs are supposed to entirely fall on the municipalities, and they're not, from what we've heard in rumblings, not exactly happy about that. So I think there is some concern that is valid about what that project might look like long term and whether or not it is going to launch and the building is going to look pretty and the campus is going to be nice. Like, we know that because MGM and Wynn and Caesars are not going to put their name behind something that is ugly. But 5 years, 10 years down the road, what does that look like when it's just the cities that are supposed to be maintaining it? What does that look like? And when they say services, we still haven't really gotten the full extent of what services are going to be available there, right? If it's job placement for the people that are living in the transitional housing, that's maybe one thing. If you're talking about services that are more for the immediate needs and they're trying to ship people, then you might see more people that are there that could potentially, I think people have concerns about. But like I said, they've been really quiet on what exactly it's going to look like and which segment of the homeless population they are trying to help, because it is not, a one-size-fits-all kind of model for different aspects of homelessness. So it's hard to tell, but I get it. I mean, if I was living right there, I would also have questions. I think that's valid.
I think the questions are the big thing. Yeah. I actually ran into Councilman Knutson a couple of nights ago, and he explained, these are actually apartments. It's not an open air shelter like the one downtown. And he also said this is a high barrier. As Scott was pointing out, they're going to be vetting people. So it is no tolerance for drugs or alcohol. People have to have a legitimate, I guess, desire to be reincorporated back into like non-homeless society, that they have to be a willingness to accept the services, which, is another sort of barrier. But it is voluntary. People can come and go, although there are lots and lots of rules. He actually sent me a multi-page answer sheet for the kind of rules that would be there. And to me, it sounds like it's going to be really hard to get into this, which begs the question whether or not this is the most efficient use of this $200 million capital investment. The other thing that Councilman Knutson pointed out to me is that this property has for decades been a mental health treatment center. It's the Ross and Neal complex, and it's pretty big, and it has gone along fine with all the neighbors for a really, really long time, and that this is just sort of a different version of that. But I'm wondering if the backers of this project, the state and resort corridor, were to respond to how does this benefit the surrounding neighborhood community? You pick this area. How does it benefit the community? What do you think their argument might be?
I don't get paid enough to answer that question. I think these folks, there's a lot of money and a lot of highly paid PR folks who should be answering that question. Personally, that's my opinion.
Well, I imagine it would be hard to answer the question like, how does this benefit the surrounding community? How does anything benefit their surrounding community? There's so many factors involved. But unless Google Maps is lying to me, it doesn't really directly abut any actual neighborhoods. It's in a commercial zone. The nearest neighborhoods are across Charleston, so there's a sort of a natural barrier there. But how it affects the wider community is sort of glaringly obvious to me when the last homeless count, tagged us at 8,000 homeless folks. A proportion of those who would be definitely benefited by this kind of a program and moved through it and into sort of the regular housed community. And, it's either this, it's going to go somewhere. Something like this has to go somewhere. And they happen to have that land. It's available. Otherwise, we're looking at Oscar Goodman's idea of putting him in the nearest disused prison.
Yeah, not necessarily a kind and probably effective way. Because,
No.
I mean, at the end, this is temporary housing,
Right.
and something has to come next for these people who are cycling out of the program. So what should come next for folks who, cycle out of programs like the Campus for Hope?
Well, I understand, David, and I could be wrong about this, but according to what I read of the agreement, each of the communities that will be feeding people into this place have to commit to creating a certain amount of affordable housing as well. Now, that's what I read in several accounts of this. If true, maybe that'll be one step toward a longer-term semi-solution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as this NIMBY-YIMBY debate rages on, I mean, I would love that if there were, like any other big development, that there are these conversations with the communities surrounding them ahead of time in a way that everyone could figure out how to work together. Like, these are our fellow citizens for a big part, and they will be cycling out. And it would be nice if relationships were made where people could feel at home in all parts of the community. But that's, we tend to yell more than we do try to find common ground, don't we?
And let's be clear, it was a big ball drop on someone's part to not reach out to the neighborhood long before this.
I mean, they didn't reach out to the legislature, remember? Like, the legislature didn't know this project was going into this space until they asked for money that was related to something else that was being impacted. Like, a lot of people were left out in the dark. So to the residents in that area, you are not alone. The people who approved the $100 million did not know where this project was going.
Yeah, no. And all credit to Brian Knutson, who has no power over this project, but he is at least gathering the neighbors and fielding the questions and trying to give them the information. So that's what a good council person does. The resort corridor, they need to step up.
And that's more than we've seen from the Campus for Hope people.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Yeah.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out-of-botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTESLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
All right, let's move into the fun third topic, which is our birthday. Hooray! So this Friday News Roundup is our 721st episode, and we've had almost as many newsletters. We have covered so many different topics, had great guests from, U.S. Senator, also including like a world-class competitive eater explaining how he could shove a burrito the size of a small Volkswagen into his gut in like an hour. So, we've had a lot of fun. We've tackled some hefty issues, as this episode is a good testament to. But I want to reflect back upon the 3 years. April, you've been a contributor almost since the beginning. Scott, you were the man. You were our newsletter editor for our first years. So what's your favorite CityCast episode, article, moment in the wild of the past 3 years?
2 quick answers then. As the person who sort of originated the newsletter and went through various iterations of it, trying to find the right approach and tack, the thing that lingers with me is just like the readers and how varied they were. I expected a certain kind of reader to be attracted to this sort of project, mostly young and mostly sort of, hipster adjacent and whatever. But I heard from all kinds of people from every point of the political and social spectrum. And that was really, even when they were calling me names and protesting my perceived liberal bias, which by the way was probably a fair call sometimes. But I can confess now because I'm no longer there. Even when they were doing that, it was great to hear from so many different people and just be reminded of the great variety that this town has when it's so possible for me to live in an isolated kind of way and not be exposed to so many people. So that's my takeaway from that. On the podcast side, my answer hasn't changed for 2.5 years. Before CityCast, my idea of a podcast was a couple of people sitting around nattering for an hour and a half about whatever niche interest they might have. So we settled into these short podcasts, and we did pretty good with news stuff right off the bat. But the one that sticks closest to my heart is an episode David did with a UNR linguist about the pronunciation of Nevada versus Nevada.
Oh yeah, that's so fun.
Yeah.
Which it was an incredibly frivolous sounding topic, but it turned out there were like all these dimensions to it: historical, cultural. There was immigration. It touched on a lot of different issues, and it just showed what could happen when David was being David, and this guest was like in sync with him. She was rolling with his Figlerisms and doing the whole thing. And when two people get in a groove, it showed you that even something that seems frivolous can reveal these hidden dimensions. And that was a really genuinely great moment for me in the life of this podcast, because it really showed what this forum can do, even in the short version that we do.
Yeah, I love history ones. I love when we just kind of get into how did that come to be, And we do a lot of those kind of episodes. They're a lot of fun. How about you, April? What have been your favorite things or moments from the CityCast podcast?
I have to mention I have to give a quick shout out to the big investigation that you and Daniel Rothberg did about the Tesla tunnels. It shows the variety in terms of that. That was great, intense reporting, which I 3 years ago would never have expected from CityCast. And I think that that's a shining moment that you guys should be really proud of. But on the lighter side, I will say that one thing that came to mind was there was an episode about the Sphere. And I think it was Layla and Sonia went and did the sort of Sphere experience and gave a review of it and talked about what it was like. And I will say that, this city is so chock full of people who want to be influencers and believe that the way to do that is by talking everything up and how everything is so amazing. Yeah. And so I really appreciated Layla being like, it was $14 for a drink or whatever. Like they kept it so real.
Dizzy. Yeah. Well, and it was right when it opened,
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was right where it opened. And I think that it was a very real perspective from that. And it felt really genuine and authentic, which I think is hard to find, particularly in podcasts or anything that's sort of like visual and that you're listening to. I think there's still great print people who do that in this town, but I think I haven't heard anybody talk about it in that way. So I really appreciated that. As somebody who has not yet been to the Sphere, but who had like FOMO and like was really worried about it, they really eased my mind into being like, how much am I missing, and gave me a real perspective. So I really appreciated that episode.
And I want to echo April's kudos on the investigation, because it shows that you don't have to be a big legacy media operation to do impactful journalism in this town. I mean, April's outfit proves that daily too. I thought that was a really great demonstration of a strategy partnering with ProPublica to create this thing that was actually of great value in the community.
Yeah, it definitely started a conversation. One of our many goals. I mean, our tagline is, "This is what Las Vegas is talking about." And we are very true to that, but also the lived experience of Las Vegas in real ways, bringing on elected officials and always having at least some pushback question, some question that maybe tosses them a little bit back on their heels. Sometimes we let them escape, but we try to push as hard as we can. And that's something that I think is really valuable because, we all live here together. We could recognize the flaws of our city while still celebrating the beauty of our city, and that really is our aesthetic. I would be remiss if I didn't shout out our original co-host, Vogue Robinson, as being such an integral part of the development. And one of my favorite episodes was an early interview that she did one-on-one with Beverly Rogers, a big philanthropist in our community who has really spent her money in ways that have elevated our community in some ways that are unprecedented. And I remember Vogue just having a heart-to-heart with her, like, how do you feel about that power to be able to influence people's lives or whatever? And there was just this huge, long pause. And then the most thoughtful response about it. And it really did give an insight into, one of our most prominent citizens, but also one who's impacting a lot of people. But then we also have so much fun on the podcast, too, with co-host Sarah Lohman. We spent a day drinking at the 5 oldest dive bars in Las Vegas. And I think that will always be one of my favorite episodes. It's just giving a report from each one as we progressively got more sloshed. Totally fun times. So, with our team here, Sonia Cho Swanson is our executive producer, Layla Muhammad is our producer, and Rob Coucheries is our newsletter editor who took up the mantle from you and is doing a great job.
Absolutely.
We're really excited to continue to do this for our community and bring new people in and hear all the voices of all the parts. I mean, it's not just about one part or another, but the whole valley. Well, we know our company is dedicated to keeping this project alive, and we'll try to do more projects akin to the boring Tesla tunnels and as fun as the dive bars. Scott and April, thank you so much for being a part of this show for the last 3 years, and thanks for your contribution today on the Friday News Roundup.
Here's to the next 3 years and beyond,
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear. That's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. Our producers this week were Sonia Cho Swanson, Layla Muhammad, and Francisco Kilgore. Our newsletter editor is Rob Coucheries, and our roving newsletter editor this week was Adrian Gonzalez. Our hosts are Sarah Lohman and me, David Figler. Music is by OG Moose, All the Kimonos, and additional music by Matt Large, courtesy of epidemicsound.com. And how about that music for the last 3 years? My sister-in-law just loves dancing to it. That's the truth. We record this show on the traditional homelands of the Nuuvi, the Southern Paiute people. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? You can also rate the show, leave us a review, that's a good birthday gift, and subscribe to our morning newsletter, Hey Las Vegas. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky. My sister and her wife sent me a video of them on a loop of the intro music, just jamming out in their car. It's the craziest video.
It is great. You guys picked some good music for it.